please tell us a story. Is your mic on, Howard? Where are you? Is your camera there? Your camera's on, but there you go.
My microphone doesn't always obey. I come from a tradition that is more based in personal narrative storytelling as opposed to folk tales and traditional stories. Although I can do traditional stories, I like to use my life in many ways as a window to the world. And this story is part of that. And it's also, this story is presented to you to honor the 5 people in my life who've died this year, all of whom were close friends, all of whom had cancer, and all of whom will be missed. One very chilly Chicago evening in November 1963, I'm in the back seat of a '59 Chevy Impala with white wall tires. I'm sitting between a very large man who works at my mother's factory, and my brother, my older brother, Alan. And as always in my life, I'm stuck in the middle seat. As the younger brother, that was my place, and I don't like the middle seat. It makes me nauseous. It makes me feel claustrophobic. The man who's driving us explained that my mother got sick at work and needed to be taken to the hospital. When we got the phone call, my brother Alan was visibly shaken. I was relieved. My mother had been sick for many months, perhaps years. We would walk together, and she would complain that she had numbness and tingling in her left arm, shortness of breath. And her doctor told her that she was a nervous woman. And all she needed to do was take tranquilizers. You're nervous, Rose. Your husband left you. Take tranquilizers. Well, I was only 14, but that didn't feel right to me. So I was relieved that we were going to the hospital. My thinking was that finally a real doctor would take a look at Mom, and I could learn what's wrong with her. And as we walk into the emergency room, the big man on my left, my brother on my right, a doctor walks towards us even before we get to the registration desk. He's a tall, white man with blonde hair, light skin, and a stethoscope around his neck. And he walks over to me, and he looks in my eyes, and he said, "I'm sorry, son. We did everything we could, but your mother was dead on arrival," and abruptly turns around and walks away. I look at my brother, and he is crying uncontrollably. I look to the big man, but he's gone. And so it's up to me to figure out, what do we do? How do we put the pieces together? I call my relatives, and what happens next? As we're taken to the Granites, who live in a very wealthy suburb on the north shore of Chicago, where we sit Shiva. And Shiva is when Jewish people die. It's a time when friends and family come by to provide support to the mourners. And so there we are in this fabulously wealthy house with all these people walking in and hugging me and giving me kisses on the cheek and saying how sorry they are that my mother died. And all I could think was, why are you sorry? You didn't kill my mother. Maybe you're sorry because when my mother was alive and working in a factory to support 2 boys, you didn't help her. You didn't help me. And I couldn't tolerate that. I hated that. And like most Jewish rituals, alcohol and lots of food is involved. And I would go downstairs as soon as people would arrive and lock myself in the basement. Where there was a ping pong table, I would fold in half and I would play ping pong all by myself all night long. Kaplunk, kaplunk, kaplunk. And when I heard the noise from the food and the drinking and the revelry die out, I would come up those stairs and go to what was called my room in this big fancy house. The last night of Shiva, I waited until it was dead silent. I walked up those stairs one at a time, slowly. I turned off the light. And when I entered the living room, the Howie that I had been, the nice Jewish boy, the mama's boy, was gone. He was gone. And what emerged was Howard, a devoutly agnostic, anti-religious, angry, left-wing Jew. Well, for the next couple of years, I was tossed around to different rich relatives. We were the poor people, by the way. We lived on hand-me-downs of everything. But I kept getting shuttled between different rich relatives, and my brother Alan and I were separated, and we've never lived together since. And I don't know what he did during those years. But what I did was get angry. I learned to hate my family. I learned to hate my brother. I learned to hate religion. And most of all, I learned to hate myself. I also learned about taking drugs, having unprotected sex, the numbing effects of alcohol. And I was also a teenager, so put all this into a big bowl and you've got a very unsavory soup. Well, the Slutsky family, the wealthiest of my relatives where I was living, decided that they didn't like me anymore. And so they took everything I owned and put it in a cardboard box and said, "You're no longer welcome here. Leave." And at that point, I realized I was truly homeless. I was a vagrant. I had no anchor. I was a teenager with a cardboard box of things that I stuffed into a backpack. And I left. I left Chicago. I traveled to Wisconsin. I traveled to upstate New York. I traveled to New York City. I traveled to Montreal. I traveled to Winnipeg. I traveled to France, to the north of England, back to New York City. And I tried to be I tried to be a better person. I tried to say, I need to find Howie again. I went into therapy. I gave up drinking. I gave up drugs. I couldn't find Howie. All I could find was a very angry, dysfunctional, often suicidal adult. Several times I went to Israel, not because I wanted to go to Israel. Understand that as a devoutly agnostic, anti-religious, left-wing Jew, Israel was not a place I saw as my home or a place that would welcome me, but to please my brother. I went to Israel several times on tours with a rabbi, an Orthodox rabbi. And if you know enough about Orthodox Judaism, a Chabad rabbi, the most devout of devout, by the name of Dov Hillel Klein. And when we traveled, Dov would welcome me. He would try and get me to engage in Jewish rituals. And I would say, no, don't force that on me. I'm Howard. And Howard doesn't engage in Jewish rituals. Yeah, don't worry. It's okay. One day in 2009, it was July 2009, I got a call from Rabbi Klein. He said to me, Howard, we're going to visit the death camps in Central Europe. You have to come. And I said, no. I said, no, because I didn't need to see that. I didn't need to feel that. But more importantly, I had been drawn in the Minnesota Fringe Festival. I was in the festival, and I had what's known as a good venue, a major venue, where people could see me. But I didn't tell Rabbi Klein that I can't come because I've got a good venue in the Fringe Festival. He wouldn't know what that meant. So I kept saying no. He kept calling me yes, no, yes, no. My brother would call and he'd claim that I was being an unpleasant word. I spoke to my friend Lauren Nemi, who some of you know. Lauren is in many ways my true rabbi. And he convinced me that I should go and come back and produce a show called Death Camp Diaries. What it was like to be a devoutly agnostic, anti-religious, left-wing Jew visiting the death camps in Central Europe. I said, Lauren, I'd come back on a Wednesday and I would open on a Friday. He wasn't deterred. He said, it'll be fresh. When you get on stage, it'll be brilliant. So I said yes. Lauren is an optimist. We went. I convinced my wife to come with. I said, if we're going to go, I want to go early. I don't want to be in Prague, which was our stepping off point, with these really religious people going to religious places, eating religious food. I just don't want to do that. And if we're flying first class because I don't want to sit in the back of the plane for all those many hours. That's who I was. I don't deny that. So we did. We went to Prague early. We found an Airbnb apartment in an interesting warehouse district in Prague. And we saw Prague as we are. We ate pork. We drank beer. We went to museums. We saw art. And then I saw a sign for a museum, and I don't remember the name. I could look it up, but I choose not to. What it was a museum of all the artifacts stolen from the Jewish people. See, the Nazis were going to have a museum of a lost race of people. And this museum in the center of Prague had all this china and jewelry and artwork stolen by the Nazis, for which they claim there was no way to figure out who these people were. We're just showing you things. I said to my wife, Pat, I want to go there. And as we walked in the door and I read their banal explanation of why they have these materials, I began to cry. And as we walked through the museum, we came to one exhibit of property that belonged to an unknown family, the Zeckendorf family. I know the Zeckendorfs, and I know that they're not dead. They are one of the wealthiest families in all of New York. And I went to law school with a Zeckendorf. And I saw this, I saw their china, I saw their silver, and I saw property that belonged to my friend and my friend's family. And I got angry and I wept. And my wife wisely grabbed me by the shoulders and took me out and said, "No, don't start a fight, Howard." And we left. And then the next day, we connected with those people, the Orthodox people who had come to join the trip. We left our apartment and went to their hotel, which was it wasn't my kind of hotel. And the food was worse than that. It was the worst kosher food you could ever imagine. Lots of fried schnitzel. And I was torn. That's not me. That's not me. Well, we began to tour the death camps, and I will spare you the details of a lot of it, except to say we were forced to take a taxi from Prague to Krakow, Poland, because of a power outage, and that's another story. But when we got to Auschwitz, we walked in under the sign that says, "Work will set you free." Down the train tracks, where they end, just adjacent to the stairway down to the place where the Jewish people were sent for showers that weren't showers, that were Zyklon B, Bayer's finest product, that gassed them and killed them. And our guide said, "Howard, I want you to read an excerpt from Elie Wiesel's Night." I said, "Why me? Why me, Tzachi?" He said, "You're an actor, a performer. Please give this life." And I read about his family. When you got off the train, if you went one way, that meant they would work you to death. If you went the other way, you went right into the showers, where his daughter, where his mother, and his sister wound up when they got off the train. And I look over, it's right there. The entrance is right there. And as I'm sobbing from reading, I see a line of people walking towards and down the stairs. I see the ghosts of the people who perished. I saw, they were there and I saw them. And I looked as a mother was holding her daughter's hand. And they were walking to the first step down. And the girl, this young girl, she looked into my eyes. And she said to me, "Remember me. Don't forget me. If you remember me, I will never die." And I promised her as I looked into her eyes. And in this moment of the worst that has ever happened to the Jewish people, a door opened to a cellar, to my heart. And Howie came up from that cellar and he walked out and he greeted the world again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we call you Howie or Howard?
I answered both.
Okay, that was wonderful. And you took the full 20 minutes to tell, so we have no time to discuss. Apologies. But people can leave messages in the chat section or Howard's email ID is on the presenters page, so you can contact him by email. Thank you very much, Howard. As one agnostic left-wing Jew to another, I salute you. Okay, thank you so much. And